Welcome. This is another Tactical Technician video brought to you from Diagnation. This is going to be a quick case study involving I believe it was like a 2014 Kia Optima. It was a 4-cylinder Kia. It was a speed density car. It did not have a mass airflow sensor. And I quickly wanted to determine why this car was so lacking in power. It just was totally gutless. You just step on the throttle and it just wouldn't move like it should. So one of the first things I wanted to prove out was the exhaust plugged, and with the transducer in cylinder number one, I was going to just get an information. I was going to look at the exhaust flow, look at the pressure, and also I was going to look at valve timing to see if the valve timing was askew. And it's a pretty quick test. I pulled the number one spark plug out, got the adapter, and put the WPS 500 in cylinder one. And then I proceeded to start it up and then power brake it, let it idle, and then I power braked it, put my foot down to see what I can see in the pattern. Here we go. We'll talk about the pattern. And right now you can just see the car is idling right here. Let me get some vertical zoom. And here we go. As far as we go, we have about idling, we have about, that's about 100 psi idling. Maybe a little high. I guess probably have to check a known good one. As a rule of thumb, the idling peak pressure and the cranking peak pressure, usually the idling peak pressure is about 40% of the cranking peak pressure. So I did not do a cranking peak pressure. We'll see the vehicle cranking, but nonetheless, I just want to talk about, before we look at the exhaust plateau to determine exhaust back pressure, we'll look at the pockets here. Just look at our valve timing, because when valve timing is out of kilter, it will also cause a lack of power. I did put a vacuum gauge on this engine, and it had about 15 inches of vacuum, which to me is a little low, but nonetheless, I can't say that's not abnormal. Some cars do idle with less vacuum. They have an Atkinson cycle. They do different things with the throttle. Nonetheless, I just wanted to get an idea of where our pockets are, and we're basically looking at at the engine idling, and we're going to look at three angles. I'm going to look at the EVO right here. Where does the exhaust valve open? And look at that angle, and then some other measurements I'll talk about after we make this measurement. I don't know the spec, but nonetheless, I want to see if we're fairly close. I'm looking about 439.56, about 40 degrees before bottom dead center, which I'm going to deem good. As a rule of thumb, we're 35 to 55 before when we look at the moment when that exhaust valve opens. I'm going to take two more measurements. I'm going to say, before I get there, I'm going to throw these numbers at you, 40 and 55. I always say the point of deepest vacuum after top dead center should be about 40 degrees. And I'll tell you that before I set the cursors up. See if we're close right here. I've got about 44, which is pretty good for the point of deepest vacuum. That tells me a lot about valve timing, that I can deem it so far so good. The next number is 55. That is when the intake valve closes. That's what usually a lot of guys who study the in-cylinder transducer uses that number, is to when the intake valve actually closes. Right now, if we ran up to really split hairs, we want to see that moment when it just pops off a seat. We're going to say about 57. So I'm going to deem that good. And so I'm going to say to myself, I don't believe we're looking at a valve timing problem for this lack of power. Let's go to let's go to an increase in throttle. And I'm sort of power braking it in drive right here. We're starting to climb as far as our pressure. Right around here, our peak pressure, okay. Our peak pressure on the top of our tower is about, okay, that's 315. That's really good. That engine's taking a good amount of air. Let's see what our exhaust plateau is. Let's kind of key in on here. This is really where we learn about plugged exhaust. Right here, when that exhaust is flowing, we're about, I'm going to say right in the middle of the hash. We're about 3.2. That's with a lot of airflow, and that's good. I'm going to say this vehicle does not have a plugged exhaust. apparently the customer did not want us to do any more work. I thought about other things. As I said, this was a quick test. I was helping another technician with it at the time, and with the transducer, we were able to determine a lot of information about what's not causing the lack of power. So we got a good plateau right here. We're not excessive, and our valve timing initially at the start of the video was pretty close to where it should be. So as far as the causing the lack of power, it was probably something else, and evidently they took it somewhere to the dealer maybe, and I never knew what became of it. Anyway, this is Diagnation signing off. Thanks a lot.